My phone lit up at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Mom never called this late. Never. They're taking the house, Michael. Her voice cracked, each word punctuated by a quiet sob. 30 days. That's all we have left. My stomach dropped as I sat up in bed, instantly alert despite the hour. The house, my childhood home with the crooked mailbox and the maple tree I'd climbed 1,000 times, was being foreclosed on. Just like that. What happened to the payment plan you set up last year? I asked, already knowing there was no good answer waiting. Your father's medical bills. We thought we could catch up, but... She trailed off, the weight of their financial collapse hanging in the silence between us. I promised to come over first thing in the morning. As I hung up, my bedroom felt suddenly smaller, the walls closing in with responsibility I never asked for. Sleep was impossible after that. I stared at the ceiling, calculating numbers that refused to add up to anything but disaster. By 7 a.m. I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table, the foreclosure notice spread out between us like a death certificate. Dad couldn't look me in the eye, his weathered hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. 43 years of mortgage payments and 3 missed ones were going to cost them everything. It's $58,700 to get current, Mom said, pointing to the number that might as well have been $1 million to them. Plus late fees. My father, once the proudest man I knew, looked diminished. We tried calling your sister first, he admitted. Lisa said she's tight on cash with the kids and all. Of course she did. Lisa, with her new SUV and the vacation photos from Cancun she'd posted just last month. Let me see what I can do, I said, the words escaping before I could fully process what I was offering. I walked out of their house that morning with a weight on my shoulders heavier than anything I'd carried before. The drive to work was a blur of mental calculations and growing dread. Wilson Manufacturing wasn't much to look at. A squat, gray building on the edge of town where I'd worked my way up to middle management over 12 years. My office was small but had a window which was more than most could say. That morning it felt like a cage. You look like hell, said Darlene, my administrative assistant, placing a stack of purchase orders on my desk. Family stuff, I muttered, not ready to explain. How could I? I'd spent my 30s being the responsible one, building my 401k, making sensible choices, living below my means. Now I was contemplating financial suicide to save my parents from their mistakes. The quarterly reports needed reviewing, but I couldn't focus. Instead, I pulled up my bank accounts and retirement statements, staring at the numbers until they blurred. I had $28,459 in savings and $143,278 in my 401k. After penalties and taxes for early withdrawal, it would be just enough. Just enough to erase 15 years of careful saving. During lunch, I called Maria Santos, my financial advisor, and scheduled an emergency meeting for that evening. This is a significant financial setback, Michael, Maria said hours later, her office feeling too warm despite the air conditioning. We're talking about wiping out your retirement progress. Starting from scratch at 38. I nodded, throat tight. I understand. Have you considered other options? A family loan from multiple relatives? Could your parents take out a reverse mortgage instead? They're underwater already. And there's no one else, I said. My sister claims she can't help. Maria sighed, shuffling the papers I'd brought. Have you really talked to her about sharing this burden? That night I called Lisa. My sister answered on the 4th ring, the sound of her kids screaming in the background. Mike. Hold on, Dylan, put that down. Sorry, it's chaos here as usual. Lisa, I need to talk to you about Mom and Dad's house. Her voice immediately cooled. They called you too, huh? They're going to lose the house, Lisa. Everything. That's terrible, she said, not sounding particularly concerned. But Mike, you know how tight things are with the kids' activities and Greg's new position still getting established. We just don't have that kind of money lying around. I bit back what I really wanted to say. I'm thinking of using my retirement fund. But it's a lot for one person to handle. That's drastic. But you've always been good with money. You'll bounce back. The dismissal in her tone was unmistakable. Listen, I've got to run. Dinner's burning. She hung up before I could respond. No offer to contribute even a portion. No acknowledgement of the sacrifice I was considering. Just the implicit understanding that fixing family problems was my job, not hers. Sleep eluded me again that night. I paced my apartment, A modest two-bedroom I'd been planning to sell for a house of my own someday. That someday had just been pushed back indefinitely. The next morning I called in sick to work. Instead of my usual routine, I drove to 4 different banks, each time sitting across from loan officers who reviewed my finances with expressions that shifted from interested to apologetic. Your debt-to-income ratio is already high with your student loans, the last one explained gently. We can't approve a personal loan of this size without collateral. By afternoon, I was sitting in my financial advisor's office again, signing papers for a 401k withdrawal that felt like signing away my future. I'm required to inform you again about the penalties, Maria said. The taxes and early withdrawal penalties will reduce the amount by nearly a third. I'm aware, I said, pen hovering over the final signature line. But they'll lose the house otherwise. And they've exhausted all their options? Bankruptcy? Loan modification? I nodded, remembering Dad's stubborn pride. Dad won't consider bankruptcy. Says it's admitting defeat. And what about repayment to you? Have you discussed terms with your parents? I hadn't, not really. There'd been tearful thanks and vague promises of paying me back someday, but nothing concrete. Maria seemed to read this in my expression. Get something in writing, Michael. Even family, she advised. Money changes people. I didn't listen. 3 days later, I walked into Countryside Community Bank with a cashier's check for $60,000, nearly everything I had. The branch manager himself handled the transaction, his eyebrows raising slightly at the amount. This will stop the foreclosure proceedings and bring the loan current, he confirmed. Your parents are fortunate to have such a devoted son. Fortune had nothing to do with it. The drive to my parents' house that afternoon felt surreal. The check sat in an envelope on the passenger seat, representing years of overtime, promotions, and dinners at home instead of restaurants. My entire safety net converted to a single piece of paper. Mom cried when I handed her the envelope. Dad tried to, but his pride only allowed his eyes to water as he clapped me on the shoulder. We'll pay you back, son. Every penny, he promised. This house will be yours someday anyway. Consider it an early inheritance investment. I nodded, wanting to believe him, needing to believe him. The relief on their faces almost made it worth it. Almost. We should get something in writing, I suggested carefully. Just to protect everyone. Mom looked hurt. Michael, we're family. You don't need paperwork between family. Of course, I backpedaled, not wanting to spoil the moment. I just thought. We know what you've sacrificed, Dad interrupted. And we won't forget it. I let it go. What else could I do? That evening I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen. My retirement account balance now read a paltry $11,432. The small portion I'd kept in a different account years ago and forgotten about. 15 years of saving, gone in a single afternoon. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Heard you helped Mom and Dad. That's really great of you. We should get together soon. Now she wanted to get together. I didn't respond. A week later, life had settled into a new normal. I picked up extra projects at work, hoping for a bonus at the end of the quarter. I canceled my streaming subscriptions, started bringing lunch from home, and put my vacation plans on indefinite hold. The spreadsheet I created projected 7 years to rebuild my savings, if nothing else went wrong. Mom called every few days, her voice bright with the relief of someone who'd narrowly escaped disaster. She talked about repainting the guest room, about Dad finally fixing the back deck. The money I'd given them had bought more than financial stability. It had restored their sense of normalcy and future. I didn't begrudge them that comfort. But each night I looked around my apartment, at the furniture I'd planned to replace, at the vacation brochures still on my coffee table, and felt the enormity of what I'd sacrificed. You did a good thing, Sarah, my boss, told me when I finally explained my frequent distraction. Family is everything. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Family was everything. But at that moment, it felt like I had given everything for family while they had given nothing in return. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The first rumble before an avalanche that would reshape everything I thought I knew about the people who shared my blood. The financial cliff I'd stepped off so willingly was nothing compared to the emotional chasm waiting ahead. But that night, I simply opened another beer and tried not to think about the future I'd just mortgaged away. The house was saved. My parents were safe. That would have to be enough. 2 weeks after saving my parents' house, I noticed the first change. It was subtle, just a slight shift in how they greeted me when I stopped by on Sunday afternoon. Mom hugged me as always, but there was something performative about it, like she was going through the motions. Dad clapped my shoulder but didn't quite meet my eyes. Come in, Mom said, ushering me toward the kitchen. I made your favorite apple pie. The house smelled the same, that mix of Dad's woodworking projects and Mom's cinnamon-heavy baking. But something felt off, like walking into a familiar room where all the furniture had been shifted 2 inches to the left. How are things? I asked, settling at the kitchen table. Any word from the bank? Dad busied himself with getting plates down from the cabinet. All squared away. No need to worry about that anymore. The dismissal in his tone was subtle but clear. Don't ask about the money. That's good, I said, watching as Mom cut the pie with careful precision. I was thinking we should maybe talk about setting up some kind of repayment plan. Nothing formal, just so we're all on the same page. Mom's knife hesitated for just a fraction of a second. She exchanged a quick glance with Dad that I wasn't meant to notice. Oh, Michael, let's not spoil a nice visit with talk about money, she said, her voice artificially bright. We told you we'll pay you back. Don't you trust us? The guilt trip was masterfully deployed. I backed off immediately, accepting the slice of pie she handed me. Of course I do. I just thought. Lisa's coming over for dinner next weekend, Dad interrupted, changing the subject. She's bringing the kids. You should join us. I nodded, noting how eagerly they pivoted to talking about my sister. Throughout the rest of the visit, every attempt I made to discuss finances was deftly redirected. By the time I left, I had a tin of leftover pie but no more clarity than when I'd arrived. That night I called Lisa, curious if she knew something I didn't. Hey stranger, she answered. Mom said you seem stressed today. Everything okay? Fine, I said, not wanting to admit how unsettled I felt. Dad mentioned you're having dinner there next weekend. Yeah, the kids miss Grandma and Grandpa. Oh, and did Mom tell you? They're thinking of redoing the kitchen. I nearly dropped my phone. Redoing the kitchen? They just needed $60,000 to avoid foreclosure. Well, Mom said now that things are stable again they want to update a few things. The house is so outdated, Mike. I hung up feeling vaguely nauseated. Something wasn't adding up but I couldn't put my finger on what. The following Thursday I stopped by unannounced after work. I'd forgotten a book I wanted to borrow from Dad's study. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a sleek black BMW parked out front that I didn't recognize. I rang the doorbell, waiting longer than usual before Mom answered, looking slightly flustered. Michael, we weren't expecting you. Sorry to drop in. I just wanted to grab that history book Dad mentioned. She hesitated before opening the door wider. Come in, but we have company. Just give us a minute to wrap up. In the living room sat a man in his 50s, wearing an expensive-looking suit. Papers were spread across the coffee table, which Mom quickly gathered up as I entered. This is Robert Klein, Dad said, his tone overly casual. An old friend. The man stood, offering his hand. Nice to meet you. Your parents speak highly of you. His business card sat on the edge of the table. I caught a glimpse as Mom swept it up with the papers. Robert Klein, real estate attorney. Are you selling the house? I blurted out. What? No, of course not, Dad said too quickly. Robert's just helping us update our insurance papers. Robert Klein looked uncomfortable. I should be going. We can continue this another time, he said, collecting his briefcase. After he left, the atmosphere was tense. I stood in the living room looking between my parents. Why do you need a real estate attorney for insurance papers? I asked quietly. It's complicated adult business, Michael, Mom said dismissively as if I were still 12 years old. Nothing for you to worry about. I'm an adult who just gave you my life savings, I reminded her. I think that entitles me to know if something's going on with the house. Dad's face hardened. We appreciate what you did, son. But that doesn't give you the right to question every decision we make. I left without the book, my mind racing. On my way out, I noticed a ceramic bowl on the entry table, a new piece I hadn't seen before. Next to it sat a brochure for kitchen countertops. Small things, but they nagged at me. The family dinner that weekend was a masterclass in forced normalcy. Lisa and her husband Greg arrived with their kids, bearing an expensive bottle of wine. I watched as Mom showed Lisa paint samples for the living room while Dad and Greg discussed golf clubs. Nobody mentioned the foreclosure crisis or my financial sacrifice. I cornered Lisa in the kitchen as she was getting dessert. Have Mom and Dad talked to you about their financial situation? I asked quietly. She rolled her eyes. They're fine now, Mike. Stop hovering. You've always been so intense about money. I gave them everything I had, I said, my voice low but intense. And now they're planning renovations and buying new things. Don't you find that strange? Maybe they're just trying to move forward. Not everyone wants to dwell on hard times. She picked up the dessert plates. Besides, they're adults. It's their house. That I saved, I reminded her. And they're grateful. We all are. But you made that choice, Mike. Nobody forced you. After dinner, while helping Mom clear the table, I noticed a kitchen drawer partially open. Inside, I glimpsed Robert Klein's business card again, alongside what looked like property documents. When Mom saw me looking, she closed the drawer with her hip. Always snooping, she said lightly, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. The following week, I tried calling my parents several times, but they were uncharacteristically busy. Dad had appointments. Mom was out with friends. When I did reach them, conversations were brief and superficial. One evening, I drove by their house and noticed Lisa's car in the driveway. They hadn't mentioned she was visiting. I didn't stop. That Friday after work, I decided to use my spare key to drop off some mail that had been delivered to my apartment by mistake. I'd always had a key, ever since high school when I worked late shifts at the local grocery store. I pulled into the driveway, noticing new flowers planted along the walkway. At the door, I inserted my key, but it wouldn't turn. Confused, I tried again, jiggling it slightly. Nothing. I rang the doorbell. After a moment, Dad answered, looking surprised to see me. Michael, what brings you by? I held up the mail. Got this by mistake. My key doesn't work. He took the envelopes, not meeting my eyes. Oh, we had the locks changed yesterday. Security upgrade. I meant to get you a new key. Behind him, I could see into the dining room where a new chandelier hung. A fancy glass piece that must have cost at least $1,000. Nice light, I said pointedly. Dad glanced back. Your mother picked it out. Listen, we're in the middle of dinner. I'll have to get you that key another time. He was already closing the door before I could respond. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of 4 place settings at the table. Someone else was dining with my parents, but I couldn't see who. Driving home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, I tried to make sense of what was happening. The parents who had been so desperate 2 months ago, so grateful for my help, were now renovating, buying new things, changing locks, and having secret meetings. Something was very wrong, and I had been too trusting to see it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through real estate listings in our town, wondering if my parents' house had suddenly appeared among them. It hadn't, but I noticed several similar properties had sold recently above market value. Was that it? Were they planning to sell now that the foreclosure threat was gone? I created a folder on my computer and began documenting everything. Dates of visits, changes I'd noticed, conversations that had felt off. It seemed paranoid, but the sinking feeling in my stomach told me I wasn't imagining things. The next morning, I received a text from Mom, having a small gathering next Saturday. Lisa and the kids will be here. Would love for you to come. I responded that I would, determined to figure out what was happening. The week dragged by, my work suffering as I obsessed over what my parents might be hiding. When Saturday arrived, I deliberately came 30 minutes early, hoping to catch them off guard. As I approached the house, I noticed Lisa's car already there, along with Robert Klein's BMW. I rang the doorbell, waiting as shuffling sounds came from inside. When Mom opened the door, her smile faltered slightly before recovering. Michael, you're early. Traffic was light, I lied. Hope that's okay. Of course, come in. We're just finishing up some business. In the dining room sat Lisa, her husband, and Robert Klein, gathered around a stack of documents. They looked up with identical expressions of surprise, and something else. Guilt? What's going on? I asked, looking from face to face. Dad stood up, clearing his throat. Just some family paperwork, son. Nothing important. Family paperwork that includes everyone but me? An uncomfortable silence fell. Robert Klein began gathering the papers, sliding them into his briefcase. I should go, he said. Mrs. Harmon, Mr. Harmon will finish this next week. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter, good to meet you both. Nobody stopped him as he left. I stood in the dining room doorway, waiting for an explanation that nobody seemed eager to provide. Michael, Mom finally said. Don't make a scene. We have other guests arriving soon. What kind of paperwork requires a real estate attorney but doesn't involve me? I pressed. Lisa stood up, her expression a mix of defensiveness and pity. Mike, Mom and Dad were just updating some things. It's not a big deal. What things? Dad's jaw tightened. Estate planning, if you must know. Private family business. I'm family, I said quietly. Mom bustled past me toward the kitchen. Of course you are, dear. Now let's not dwell on boring paperwork. Who wants appetizers? The subject was closed just like that. Throughout the gathering, which turned out to be just us and two neighbors, I watched my family interact. Dad showed off his new grill to the neighbors. Mom and Lisa discussed plans for Thanksgiving. Everyone was careful to include me in conversation but equally careful to avoid anything substantial. I left early claiming a headache. As I drove home, the pieces were starting to form a pattern I didn't want to see. My parents weren't just being secretive, they were deliberately excluding me from something important. And whatever it was, it involved their house, the house my money had saved. The warning signs had been flashing for weeks. I'd just been too trusting, too willing to give them the benefit of the doubt to see them clearly. That would not be a mistake I'd make again. 3 days after that uncomfortable family gathering, I was sorting through my mail when I spotted an official-looking envelope with the county clerk's stamp in the corner. Probably jury duty, I thought, tearing it open without much interest. What I pulled out wasn't a jury summons. It was a property transfer notification, sent to me as a potentially interested party. My hands began to shake as I read the formal language once, twice, 3 times, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Notice of recorded deed transfer property. 1427 Oakwood Lane, previous owners. Thomas and Eleanor Harmon, new owner. Lisa Marie Carter. The date of transfer was just over a week ago. According to the attached documentation, my parents had transferred full ownership of their home, the home I had saved from foreclosure with my life savings, to my sister. For the sum of $10. A nominal amount to make the transfer legal. My vision blurred. $10. My sister had paid $10 for a house I'd spent $60,000 to save. I stumbled to my couch and collapsed, the paper clutched in my hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The room seemed to spin around me. All those secretive meetings, the renovations, the changing of locks. It all made terrible sense now. They had planned this all along. Or at least they'd decided on it shortly after I'd handed over my money. I'd been nothing but a convenient ATM to them, a way to clear the debt so they could give Lisa a fresh start with a paid-off house. After the initial shock subsided, anger rose in its place, a hot, pulsing rage that made my hands shake. I picked up my phone and called Lisa directly. No more tiptoeing around. "Hey Mike," she answered casually. "What's up? How does it feel to own a house you paid $10 for?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "Who told you?" she finally asked, her tone defensive. "The county clerk's office was kind enough to notify me," I said. "Congratulations on your new property. I hope the $60,000 I put into it doesn't weigh too heavily on your conscience." "Mike, it's not what you think," she started, her voice taking on that placating tone I'd heard her use on her children when they were being difficult. "Mom and Dad made this decision on their own. They're getting older, they need stability. And I suppose you tried really hard to talk them out of it," I shot back. "Look, they wanted someone who could live with them, help take care of them. You're always so busy with work and I have the kids." "Stop." My voice cracked. "Just stop. You don't get to spin this. You knew I emptied my retirement account to save that house. You knew and you took it anyway. They're giving me the house because I have children, Mike. Their grandchildren need stability. What would you even do with a house that size? You're single, you work all the time." I hung up. Her words burned like acid. Not only had they betrayed me, they'd apparently convinced themselves they were justified in doing so. I sat in my apartment for hours, staring at nothing, the notification letter on the coffee table before me. Outside, the sun set and darkness crept in, but I didn't bother turning on the lights. The shadows matched my mood. Around 9, my phone lit up with text messages and missed calls from both my parents. I ignored them all. Eventually, I dragged myself to bed but didn't sleep, watching the ceiling as headlights occasionally swept across it from the street below. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. I couldn't face the normality of spreadsheets and meetings with this hurricane raging inside me. Instead, I drove to my parents' house. No, Lisa's house now, determined to hear the truth from them directly. Dad answered the door, his expression shifting rapidly from surprise to wariness when he saw my face. Michael, we've been trying to reach you. I know, I said, walking past him into the entryway. Where's Mom? In the kitchen, he said, following me as I moved through the house. Mom was at the table with a cup of tea, looking up with a start when I entered. The property transfer notification lay on the table in front of her. You were going to tell me, she said immediately. We were trying to find the right time. When would that have been? I asked, keeping my voice level with effort. After you'd moved in with Lisa? After you'd remodeled the entire house with my money? Dad sat down heavily beside Mom. Son, it wasn't an easy decision. Really? Because it looks pretty straightforward to me. I save the house, you give it to Lisa. $10. That's what my $60,000 was worth to you. It's not about the money, Mom insisted, her hands trembling slightly around her teacup. It's about the future. Lisa has the kids, she needs the space. And what about my future? I interrupted. The future I sacrificed to save this house? Did that factor into your decision at all? The silence that followed was answer enough. We'll pay you back, Dad finally said. Every penny with interest. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. With what? Your Social Security checks. You were 3 months from foreclosure just weeks ago. Lisa will help, Mom said. The house will be in her name but we'll still live here paying the bills together. It's a family solution. A family solution, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. Except the family member who actually saved the house wasn't included in the decision. Dad's expression hardened. Michael, you need to understand. No, you need to understand, I cut him off. I didn't just give you money. I gave you my security, my retirement, my future. And you treated it like a gift with no strings attached, something you could take and then do whatever you wanted with. That's not fair, Mom protested, tears forming in her eyes. We're grateful for what you did. Grateful people don't behave like this, I said quietly. They don't go behind someone's back. They don't exclude them from major decisions about property they helped save. They don't treat their own son like nothing more than a checkbook. The truth of my words hung in the air between us. Neither of them could meet my eyes. We thought you'd understand, Dad finally said. Lisa needs the security. With her marriage to Greg being what it is. I blinked. What about her marriage? They exchanged glances. They've been having problems, Mom admitted. Financial strain mostly. Greg's business isn't doing well. We thought, if they had the house, no mortgage to worry about. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. So I didn't just bail you out. I bailed Lisa and Greg out too. The whole family getting a fresh start on my dime. It's not like that, Mom insisted, but her protest sounded hollow even to my ears. I stood up, suddenly needing to be anywhere but in that kitchen. I need to go. Michael, please. Mom reached for my arm. Can't we work this out? As a family. I gently removed her hand. You stopped treating me like family the moment you decided my financial sacrifice entitled me to nothing. Not even the courtesy of being included in your plans. I walked out, ignoring their calls for me to come back to talk more, to understand. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, fighting back emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. The betrayal was complete, undeniable, and somehow even worse than I'd imagined. Instead of going home, I drove to Lisa's house across town. Her minivan was in the driveway. I knew Greg would be at work, the kids at school. She opened the door with the wary expression of someone expecting a confrontation. Like, why? I asked simply, my voice barely controlled. You knew what that money meant to me. She sighed, stepping back to let me in. Her living room was cluttered with toys and laundry baskets. It wasn't my idea, if that makes any difference. It doesn't, I said. You could have said no. You could have told them it wasn't fair to me. And then what? She demanded. They'd still have no money, the house would still be at risk, and none of our problems would be solved. So the solution was to solve everyone's problems at my expense? Lisa sat down on the sofa, pushing aside a pile of children's books. Look, Mom and Dad need someone to take care of them as they get older. You know that. I have the kids, I can be there for them. And the fact that you and Greg are having money problems had nothing to do with it, I said flatly. Her eyes widened slightly. They told you about that? They let it slip. Seems like everyone in this family has been keeping secrets from me. Lisa had the grace to look ashamed. Greg's business is struggling. We've been living on credit cards for months. When Mom and Dad suggested this arrangement, it seemed like the answer to everything. Everything except what happens to me, I pointed out. You'll be fine, Mike, she said with that dismissive confidence I'd heard my entire life. You always land on your feet. You're the responsible one, the one who always makes the smart choices. And that makes me the perfect person to take advantage of, I said bitterly. Nobody's taking advantage. $10, Lisa. I couldn't keep the anger from my voice. You paid $10 for a house I put $60,000 into. How is that not taking advantage? She flinched. The transfer amount doesn't matter. It's just a legal formality. It matters to me, I insisted. It shows exactly how much my contribution was valued. Lisa rubbed her temples. What do you want me to say? That I should have turned down a solution that helps Mom and Dad stay in their home? That helps my kids have their grandparents nearby? That gives Greg and me some financial breathing room? I want you to acknowledge that this was wrong, I said quietly. That I deserved better from my family. She looked at me for a long moment and I saw something harden in her expression. You think you're the only one who makes sacrifices? I gave up my career to raise those kids. I put my life on hold. This is the first good thing that's happened to us in years, and you're making it all about you. Her words cut deep, twisting the knife that was already buried in my chest. I realized then that there would be no acknowledgement, no apology. In their minds, they'd made the right choice, the only choice, and my feelings about it were inconvenient but ultimately irrelevant. I stood up. Enjoy the house. Mike, don't be like this, Lisa called after me as I walked to the door. We're still family. I turned back, meeting her eyes one last time. Family doesn't do what you did. Not to someone they claim to love. Driving away, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The anger was still there, but beneath it now was a cold, clear certainty. The landscape of my life had changed forever. The people I thought I knew, the people I thought I could trust above all others, had shown me exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of concern. Dead last. Back in my apartment, I sat down and drafted an email to my parents. Calm, factual, devoid of the emotions churning inside me. I laid out exactly what the $60,000 had meant to my future. I calculated the lost retirement earnings over the next 3 decades, nearly $500,000. I outlined what I would need to do to recover from this financial blow. And then I made it clear. I expected repayment with interest in legally binding terms. Not vague promises. Not family assurances. A contract with consequences for non-payment. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I blocked their numbers and Lisa's on my phone. Family changes when money's involved. I'd heard that phrase all my life but never truly understood it until now. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had proven that their love came with very specific conditions indeed. And it was time I accepted that truth and protected myself accordingly. 2 weeks passed with no response to my email. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on extra projects to avoid the hollow feeling that consumed me whenever I was alone in my apartment. My colleagues noticed the change but seemed to attribute it to simple dedication rather than the desperate distraction it really was. The silence from my family was both a relief and a new kind of pain. I checked my spam folder obsessively, wondering if perhaps they had responded and I'd missed it. But there was nothing. No acknowledgement, no defense, no contrition. Just silence. Then on a rainy Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly sales projections, my phone lit up with a text message. My heart stuttered when I saw it was from Mom. Mortgage is due. Can you help? Things are tight this month. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was reading. After everything that had happened, the betrayal, my explicit laying out of how they had financially devastated me, my demand for formal repayment, her first contact was to ask for more money. My hands began to shake. Did they think I was bluffing? That my anger would fade and I'd fall back into the role of family fixer? The casual entitlement of that simple text message broke something inside me that I hadn't realized was still intact. I set my phone down on my desk and walked to the break room, filled a paper cup with water and drank it slowly, trying to calm my racing heart. Colleagues passed by, nodding greetings that I barely registered. When I returned to my desk, the message was still there, its simple audacity stunning me anew. For 10 minutes, I wrote and deleted responses. Some were long explanations of why her request was inappropriate. Others were angry, filled with words I'd never said to my mother. None of them seemed right. Finally, I typed 6 words. Ask the new owner. Lisa's house. My thumb hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. This reply would make it clear that the old dynamic, where I sacrificed and they accepted, was permanently broken. There would be no going back from this. I pressed send. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then the typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, a response. That's not fair, Michael. We're still your parents. I didn't reply. What was left to say? Instead, I silenced my phone and tried to focus on the spreadsheets in front of me. The numbers blurred as tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them away furiously, embarrassed even though no one in the office was looking at me. An hour later, my desk phone rang. The receptionist informed me that my sister was in the lobby, insisting on seeing me. I briefly considered refusing but then decided it was better to face this head-on. Send her up, I said. Lisa looked out of place among the cubicles and conference rooms of Wilson Manufacturing. Her designer purse and carefully styled hair contrasted sharply with the practical, business-casual atmosphere. Heads turned as I led her to a small meeting room for privacy. Mom's crying, she said without preamble once the door closed behind us. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, surprised by how level my voice sounded when everything inside me was churning. Your text was cruel. And asking me for more money after taking my house wasn't? Lisa sighed, dropping into one of the chairs. It's not your house, Mike. You helped them out of a tough spot, which was generous, but that doesn't make it your property. I never said it was my property, I countered. But my investment in it entitled me to some consideration before it was given away. Look, she leaned forward. Greg and I are trying to sort out our finances. We can't cover their mortgage payment this month. It's just a timing issue. So you want me to keep paying for a house that you now own, I said slowly. Do you not see how absurd that is? It's not about the house. It's about Mom and Dad having a roof over their heads. For our parents, Mike. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant $60,000 to me, I said quietly. What did it cost you exactly? Her face flushed. Not everything is about money. Says the person who literally came here to ask for money. We stared at each other across the table, years of unspoken resentments and different treatment hanging in the air between us. Fine, she finally said, standing up. I'll figure something out. I always do. Yes, you usually figure out how to get someone else to solve your problems, I replied. Maybe try a different approach this time. She left without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor as she strode toward the elevators. I remained in the meeting room, suddenly exhausted, as if the conversation had drained the last of my emotional reserves. When I returned to my desk, my boss Sarah was waiting for me. Her concerned expression told me she'd noticed something was wrong. Everything okay? Your sister seemed upset. I hesitated, then made a decision. Actually, can we talk privately for a minute? In her office, I gave her the condensed version of what had happened. The foreclosure, my financial sacrifice, the betrayal. As I spoke, the professional mask I'd been maintaining cracked. My voice broke when I described getting the text message about the mortgage. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Michael, I had no idea you were dealing with this. Why didn't you say something sooner? I shrugged, embarrassed by my display of emotion. It's personal. I didn't want to bring my problems to work. This isn't just a personal problem. This is a significant financial crisis that's affecting your well-being, she said firmly. The company has an employee assistance program that includes financial counseling. And there might be options for a hardship withdrawal from your company retirement plan to help rebuild your savings. Her practical concern, so different from my family's dismissal, nearly undid me completely. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Take the rest of the day off, she said. And however much time you need to get your feet under you. Your projects can wait. I thanked her and left, driving home in a daze. My apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in with the weight of my new reality. I'd lost not just my savings but my family too, or at least the version of them I'd always believed in. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the drive. I finally looked at it to find multiple messages from both parents and a missed call from Lisa. I couldn't face reading them yet. Instead, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat on my balcony, watching the traffic below as afternoon faded into evening. When I finally checked the messages, they ranged from guilt-tripping, "After all we've done for you," to angry, "You're tearing this family apart over money," to pleading, "Please don't do this to us." None acknowledged the fundamental injustice of what they had done. That night I didn't sleep. I paced my apartment, replaying conversations in my head, thinking of all the things I should have said. Around 3 a.m. I started making lists. What I needed to do to rebuild financially, what boundaries I needed to establish with my family, what support systems I could rely on outside of them. By morning, exhaustion had brought a strange clarity. I showered, made coffee, and called the employee assistance program number Sarah had given me. I scheduled an appointment with a financial counselor for the following day. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and necessary. I contacted a lawyer. Not for a lawsuit. I wasn't sure I had legal grounds for one anyway, but for guidance on protecting myself going forward. I needed to know if there was any way to formalize my parents' debt to me, or if I should simply accept the loss and focus on rebuilding. The lawyer, a straightforward woman named Janet Myers, listened to my story with the detached sympathy of someone who had heard similar tales of family financial betrayal. The sad truth is, without documentation of the loan terms at the time you gave them the money, it's very difficult to enforce repayment, she told me. You could sue, but it would be your word against theirs about whether it was a gift or a loan. And the property transfer to my sister? Unless you can prove they transferred it specifically to avoid repaying you, which is difficult, that's legal. Unfair but legal. I nodded, having expected as much. What would you recommend? Honestly, send one more formal request for repayment, via certified mail. Outline the amount, the circumstances, and your expectation of repayment. Then, if they refuse or ignore it, you may need to make the difficult decision to write it off, both financially and emotionally. I thanked her for her time, paid her consultation fee, and left her office feeling oddly lighter. There was freedom in knowing the worst-case scenario and beginning to accept it. That evening, I drafted the letter she suggested. It was calm, factual, and devoid of the emotional language I'd used in my previous email. I stated what I had paid, when and under what circumstances. I requested a formal acknowledgement of the debt and a structured repayment plan. I gave them 30 days to respond. As I sealed the envelope, I realized I was preparing for their silence. I was establishing a paper trail not because I expected it to work, but because I needed to know I had done everything possible before walking away. The next day I mailed the letter via certified mail. That same afternoon I sat down with the financial counselor from the employee assistance program. We created a recovery plan, aggressive saving, possible part-time work, delaying retirement by several years. It wasn't ideal, but it was doable. I wasn't ruined, just setback. Many people never recover from financial setbacks like this, the counselor told me. The fact that you're taking action so quickly is a good sign. That night, for the first time since discovering the betrayal, I slept soundly. The breaking point had been reached and passed. I was no longer caught in the limbo of disbelief and hurt. I was moving into action, into a future where I didn't depend on my family's recognition of what they had done to me. In the morning, I had a text from an unknown number that turned out to be my Uncle Jim, my father's brother. Heard about the situation with your parents. Not taking sides, but wanted to check if you're okay. It was the first acknowledgement from anyone in the extended family that what had happened to me might not be okay. A small thing perhaps, but in that moment, it felt enormous. Proof that I wasn't crazy for feeling wronged. I'm getting there, I replied. Thanks for asking. Sometimes the breaking point isn't a dramatic explosion. It's the quiet certainty that comes after the storm. The knowledge that while you didn't choose this path, you can still decide how to walk it. And I was finally ready to start walking. The certified letter I'd sent to my parents was delivered on a Wednesday. According to the tracking information, my mother had signed for it. I expected an immediate flurry of calls or texts, angry rebuttals, tearful pleas, or perhaps even reluctant acknowledgement. Instead, there was nothing. The silence stretched from days into a week. Initially, I checked my phone compulsively, both dreading and hoping for a response. By the 8th day of silence, I began to understand a painful truth. They had no intention of acknowledging what they owed me, either financially or emotionally. Around this time, a cousin's wedding invitation arrived in the mail. The thought of facing my entire extended family, many of whom would have heard some version of what happened, made my stomach knot. I stared at the RSVP card for 3 days before finally checking regretfully declines and dropping it in the mail. That same evening, my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called. "Michael, I heard you're not coming to Jen's wedding?" "I don't think it's a good idea right now," I replied carefully. "Because of this business with your parents?" Her directness caught me off guard. "Everyone's talking about it, you know. Your mother's telling people you abandoned them over money." The injustice of this characterization stung sharply. "That's not what happened." "I figured as much. Your mother has always had a selective memory when it comes to her children." There was something in her tone I'd never heard before. A hint that perhaps my experiences with my family weren't as isolated as I'd always believed. "Did they tell you I emptied my retirement account to save their house?" I asked. "Or that they transferred it to Lisa without telling me?" "Some version of it. Mostly about how ungrateful you're being now." She sighed. "Look, Michael, families are complicated. But showing up to Jen's wedding alone would make a statement. Hiding away just reinforces their narrative." Her words settled uncomfortably. He was right. Isolation wasn't helping me. "I'll think about it," I promised. After we hung up, I pulled out the RSVP card I'd saved a copy of and sent an email to Jen directly, changing my response to attending. It was time to stop hiding. The following week brought another unexpected development. My company announced a new satellite office opening in Denver, with opportunities for internal transfers. During a department meeting, Sarah caught my eye as the news was shared. Later, she stopped by my desk. "You should apply for the project manager position in Denver," she said without preamble. "Fresh start, promotion track, cost of living adjustment. You'd be perfect for it." The idea of putting physical distance between myself and the situation was suddenly appealing. "You think I'd have a shot?" "I've already mentioned you to the VP. They're looking for someone with your exact skill set. Think about it." That night, I updated my resume for the first time in years. As I documented my accomplishments and skills, I realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being the family fixer, the responsible one. Without that role, who was I? Perhaps it was time to find out. The 30-day deadline I'd given my parents came and went without response. On day 31, I filed the debt in my mind under lost causes, and focused instead on what I could control: my career, my living situation, and the boundaries I needed to maintain going forward. I applied for the Denver position and was called for an interview the following week. On the day before the interview, Uncle Jim texted again. "Hear you're coming to Jen's wedding. Good. Don't let them push you away from family that cares about you." His message gave me unexpected strength during the interview, a reminder that not everyone saw me as dispensable. I spoke with confidence about my qualifications and vision for the role. When asked why I was interested in relocating, I simply said, "I'm looking for new challenges and growth opportunities." It wasn't a lie, just not the whole complicated truth. 2 weeks later, I was offered the position with a salary increase that would help accelerate my financial recovery plan. I accepted immediately. When I told my coworkers, they organized an impromptu happy hour. Amid the congratulations and good wishes, I realized I'd built relationships here that I'd never fully appreciated. Darlene, my administrative assistant, got teary-eyed and made me promise to stay in touch. Mark from accounting, whom I'd barely spoken to outside of budget meetings, gave me tips on Denver neighborhoods from when he'd lived there after college. These people weren't just colleagues. They were a support system I hadn't recognized until I was leaving. The day before Jen's wedding, I packed my car for the 3-hour drive to the venue, a rustic barn converted for events in the countryside. My stomach churned at the thought of seeing my parents and Lisa, but I kept reminding myself of Aunt Carol's advice. Showing up made a statement. I arrived at the hotel where most of the family was staying and immediately ran into cousins and aunts and uncles in the lobby. Their reactions varied from awkward avoidance to deliberate normalcy to open curiosity. I navigated each interaction as best I could, neither hiding from the situation nor making it the center of attention. At the rehearsal dinner, my parents arrived late, entering with Lisa and her family. They froze momentarily when they saw me, clearly not having expected me to attend. I nodded politely from across the room but made no move to approach them. This was Jen's celebration. I wouldn't disrupt it with family drama. Later, as I was getting a drink from the bar, Lisa appeared beside me. She looked tired, the confident facade slightly cracked. "Mom and Dad are upset you're moving to Denver," she said. I raised an eyebrow. How did they find out? Small town. People talk. She fidgeted with her bracelet. "Is it because of everything?" "It's a promotion," I said simply. "A good opportunity. But the timing." "Lisa," I interrupted gently, "my career decisions aren't about you or them anymore. That's part of setting boundaries." She looked genuinely confused. "Boundaries?" "Yes. Like not financially supporting people who have shown they don't value that support." Her face flushed. "That's not fair. We value. Actions speak louder than words. And no one's actions have indicated that my financial sacrifice mattered to any of you." The DJ announced dinner was being served, saving us from further conversation. Throughout the meal, I could feel my parents watching me from their table across the room. I focused on chatting with my table mates, second cousins and their partners whom I rarely saw but found surprisingly easy to talk with. After dinner, during the dancing, Aunt Carol sat down beside me. "You're handling this well," she observed. "More maturely than your parents, frankly." "They haven't even tried to talk to me," I said, watching them on the far side of the dance floor. "They will," she predicted. "They're realizing ignoring the problem won't make you fall back in line. That's why they're upset about Denver. They're losing control." Her insight was unsettling but rang true. My move represented a final cutting of the invisible strings they'd always used to pull me back into their orbit when needed. The next morning, as I was checking out of the hotel, my father appeared in the lobby. He looked older somehow, more fragile than he had just months ago. "Going back already?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I nodded. "Need to finish packing for the move." He cleared his throat. "Your mother and I, we wish you wouldn't go so far away." It wasn't an apology or even an acknowledgement of what had happened between us. Just another expectation that I should adjust my life around their preferences. "I've accepted the position," I said. "It's a good opportunity for me. I understand that, but family should stay close. Especially as we get older." I met his eyes directly. "I sent you a letter outlining how we could move forward. You chose not to respond." He looked away. "It's complicated. The house. It's better for everyone this way." "Better for everyone except me," I pointed out. "And that's the pattern I'm breaking by moving to Denver." He seemed genuinely surprised, as if the idea that my needs should factor into family decisions was a novel concept. Before he could respond, Mom and Lisa appeared from the hotel restaurant, stopping short when they saw us talking. "Michael," Mom said cautiously, "we missed you at breakfast." "I needed to get an early start," I replied. "Long drive ahead." An awkward silence fell. I could see other family members in the background, pretending not to watch our interaction. "Well," I finally said, "I should get going." Mom stepped forward. "Call when you get to Denver? Let us know you're settled." The request was so normal, so motherly, that for a moment I almost forgot everything that had happened. But then I remembered the text about the mortgage, the casual expectation that I would continue to finance their lives even after they'd betrayed me. "I'll think about it," I said honestly. "Right now, I'm focused on rebuilding my life." "You make it sound like we destroyed it," Lisa said, a defensive edge to her voice. "You took something important from me," I replied calmly. "Not just the money but the trust that family would treat me fairly. I have to rebuild both." I turned to go, but my father's voice stopped me. "We may not have handled this well," he admitted quietly. "But we're still your family." I looked back at them, the parents who had raised me, the sister I'd grown up with. They were still my family, yes. But that no longer meant what it once had. "Being family isn't just a fact," I said. "It's something you demonstrate through actions. When your actions change, we can talk about what being family means going forward." I walked out to my car with a strange lightness in my step. For the first time since this all began, I felt truly in control of my life and my future. The pain wasn't gone. Betrayal leaves scars that take time to fade, but it no longer defined me. 6 weeks later, settled in my new apartment in Denver with a view of the mountains from my window, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note in my mother's handwriting. A start on what we owe you. More to follow monthly. It wasn't everything, and it came without the emotional acknowledgement I'd hoped for. But it was something, a beginning, perhaps, of a new understanding between us. I deposited the check and sent a simple text. Received. Thank you. The journey of rebuilding from ashes is rarely quick or complete. Some pieces of what was lost can never be fully recovered. But in their place, something new and perhaps stronger can grow, if given the chance. I was giving myself that chance. And maybe in time I could give my family one too, on new terms with clear boundaries, and with the hard-earned wisdom that while blood ties are permanent, trust and respect must be continuously earned even among family. Especially among family.